Dear Diary, making the decision to immigrate to Calgary felt like I was placing an Amazon order for freedom, endless possibilities, social security, and a beautiful world of seamlessly integrated multiculturalism. Only instead of autofilling my credit card information, clicking buy now, and receiving my package the next day, I spent months filling out paperwork and acquiring various documentations. And I spent years waiting for my visa. And when my metaphorical package finally did arrive, it wasn't exactly what I ordered.
We're Onya and Tomi, and on Diary of a Niger Immigrant, we're talking about what happens after you buy that one-way ticket. We'll chat with guests and hear their immigration stories. We'll commiserate, celebrate wins, and gossip about recent microaggressions. Buckle up, y'all.
This is part 2 of our conversation with Tolu. If you missed part 1, be sure to check that out first and then join us back here. Thanks for listening.
There were times when I wondered, was that just a bit much for him? Did he need that? Should we have just said, oh, Mickey Mouse is real and so is Santa. Let's go to Canada, Should we have, or did it help him that there was this reality check on, you can't go through life blaming everybody else. Oh, they were mean to me because I'm black. Oh, they didn't include me because I'm black. Oh, there are times when it's like, okay, so everybody is black. Did they include you? No. Why? But there are times I wonder, did we need to do that? So my answer is, me personally, I have not had any expertise. My faith really grounds me. So even in what I do, I'm checking with God and I'm saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help. Is this what you would like me to do? Do you have another idea for me? Please make it known because I don't have to do it this way. But I've always tried to just be honest about my parenting, honest about my limitations, honest about the fact that my husband and I are human beings who also have our own emotions. We don't always get it right. Honest about the fact that each child, my personal philosophy is my kids don't actually belong to me, that I am doing a mission in their lives and I've been chosen to be their mom. It's a privilege for me, but they are individuals of their own, their souls that belong to God. My job is to make sure that they're safe and they turn out to be the best day that they can be. And even in that, I struggle. I didn't let my son, this is an example, I didn't let my son drink Coke until he was 10. We had this thing that he wouldn't drink pop. And even if he could have pop, it had to be clear. So he would only have Sprite until he was 10. And so I deprived him of drinking pop with color. And I didn't introduce him to chocolate until he was, how old was he? And another mom looked at me when my 2-year-old didn't know what an Easter egg was. And she was like, Tolu, you're so mean. And I said, why? She goes, every kid should have chocolate. And I said, no. But then I thought, maybe I am mean. My poor child doesn't know an Easter egg. The boy was like, oh, ball. Oh. And then he said, it's an Easter egg. And he was kicking it. And she's like, and all the other kids were like eating their Easter eggs. Yeah. And then she's like, don't tell me he doesn't know this thing is edible. And I'm like, But I don't know. Was that right or wrong? I honestly can't tell
best.
you.
Yeah.
I was like, let's try and acquire a taste first for certain healthy things. Learn how to drink water. And then when you're older, and it's on you if you have a sugar addiction, fine, good for you. But I was just like, let's not get hooked on the sugar just yet. So by the time he was 10, he really didn't know how to drink Coke. So even when we went to the restaurant and we're like, this is your day. You passed the 10-year-old mark. You can have Coca-Cola. And he tried it. He was like, can I have water, please? So, but I don't know if that was a good thing to do. So, Anya, my answer is, I don't do anything I do because I'm good at it or because I'm an expert or I know what I'm doing. I'm just really trying to keep it real and trying to stay grounded.
I like that honesty because I never actually realized that side to it, and like things that it's because you've come out now and then you're telling me some of the things that you did and you're like, oh, because as a parent, like you constantly question yourself and you do the things that you feel are right for the kids. But by the end of the day, when they grow, how do we try, like, what do we do, or how do you think other African parents can do better in a way that they don't grow up and they're going to therapy because we've scarred them and because
I mean,
we
I
feel
don't
like
think you can get away from that. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna jump and
Right.
say
Yeah.
I think everyone will need therapy from their childhood scars, and that's okay.
like is it an African parent thing or
I think
it's
an
just
every parent
general?
thing. I think it's
Yeah.
an every parent thing. I just don't think there's anyone that's not gonna have like scars and trauma from their upbringing, which is fine because like you're so vulnerable, you're so sensitive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what could be a throwaway comment that a parent made, you could be
Yes.
repeating every day for
in
the
your
rest of your
head.
life.
Yeah.
And there's just no way for you to know.
Yeah.
Not to distract from your question though, because I do
No,
think that's a
like,
good question.
I
of
like
just,
that you're bringing that insight because I really want you're like the second gen here, and you have that insight of what it is to be raised by an African parent. We were raised by an African parent in Africa,
Right.
So, like whatever happens to us, we see it happening to the neighbor,
Right.
And we
Yeah.
know that this is how it is done.
Yeah.
Like if you do
You're like, I'm
anyhow,
not
you
the
will
only one
collect.
getting beat.
Yeah, if you do anyhow, you will collect, right? But like when you're in another world and you're like, okay, I didn't like that. I used to collect like that from my parents. I want to do better. I don't want to. But at the same time, you have that thing ingrained in you as an African that this is how we raise our kids. This is how we discipline the kids. This is how you correct them. But they're in a different world now where they
Yeah.
also go to school and they have other friends and they say, so like, how do you draw the line and how do you create boundaries between being like disciplining the child and raising the child in the ways of the Lord that when they grow up, they won't depart from it, and actually abusing and scarring them? How do we go about this? How do we grow out of our own childhood trauma to become better parents? And how are you guys even perceiving this whole thing? What do you think would be, if you were in our shoes, what would you do differently, right? That kind of thing. That's why I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know.
Fair. What do you think?
Well, what I think is, again, is this whole human complexity of everybody's so different. And there's so many layers to who we are. Like I've heard some people say, this is how I was raised. My mother raised me this way. This is how it's going to be. And then my question is, who is to say your mother got it right? And then I've heard some people say, this is how my mother raised me. I'm
do the
never
exact
doing that
opposite.
to my kids,
Yeah.
you know. And then who is to say it's such a bad thing, you know? So I think it's important to be self-aware first. And this is where I think, and I may be wrong, I say this with respect, but I wonder if in my culture as a Nigerian, I feel like we are a little deficient in self-awareness. That we often don't do introspective things much, except when we're stressed or when somebody, you know, when something awful happens, then all this emotion comes out. But we don't have a habit of being emotionally introspective and just saying, hang on, who am I and why am I here? And why did I respond that way? Why was I angry when that person said that? Why did I shut that person out? Why do I have a tendency to not speak to people when they offend me? You know, just being self-aware. This is who I am. This is why I am like this, I think. This is great, but this is not so great. This is an advantage for me. This is a weakness for me. You know, and just being honest about that we're not perfect. We don't have it going. So being self-aware then means looking at our kids with this. I don't know about everybody else, but when I had my kids, I just fell in love. You know, I'm just like, oh, my marriage day was good, but this baby, best day of my life, you know. And I just fell in love with these little people. And then, you know, like they turn 2 and can talk. And they start talking back, you know. And I remember my son being 4 and telling me, no, you're not in charge.
Hilarious.
And I'm like, what do you mean
That's
I'm
so
not?
funny.
I'm mommy. He goes, Daddy's in charge.
Oh wow.
I feel like try that one more time.
You know, and then I'm like, who is this
How dare
person?
you.
Like, who is this? You know, so suddenly I realized,
Oh my gosh.
okay, yes, I gave birth. yes, I've been nurturing this child, but this is a person
This is a
all on their
whole
own.
person
Like this
separate
is
from me.
their
Yeah.
brain is different, the way they think is different. I can't just be like, oh, because I'm your mother. Oh, okay. Well, you're not in charge, you know. So wow. But it's just honestly, Ani, I think everything we do for our kids, if we did it because of love, even if we didn't fully get it right, I think that counts for something. And I think just being self-forgiving as well and knowing I deprived you of chocolates when you were a child. I'm very sorry. You know, now you have a chocolate addiction. You can't stop eating it because your mommy, because you get that.
Yeah.
There's some
Yeah.
people who say, my mom didn't let me have chocolate. And the day I tasted it,
Yeah.
something clicked. And now I'm addicted. And it's your fault, mom. Thanks, mom. You know, child. And then someone like, I've met people who were homeschooled and they're like, my family deprived me from social contact. Now I'm damaged. I've met people who were homeschooled and they say, my family did me a huge favor. You know, being homeschooled was the best thing that happened to me. I don't know. But if we do it genuinely because we love them, and here's one thing that occurred to me. My job in my kids' lives is I am there to protect them. So I don't follow this school of thought of just let them do and have whatever they want if it makes them happy. I'm like, okay, so if they want to swim in sewage, I'm supposed to be like, if it makes you happy, honey, you know, like, just do it. Go. And then now you have salmonella. Ooh, you know, no.
That's
you
the
know,
doctor speaking.
exactly. Yes, it makes them happy, but am I protecting them right now? But again, we have to hold that loosely because we don't have control over so many things. So will bubble wrapping my kids help them? No, it will just make me more anxious and it will make them deficient. So there's a learning curve that I think will never end. We will never figure this thing out. God willing, if I'm still a parent when I'm 80, I'm sure I'll still be learning stuff. I'm sure I'll still be figuring stuff out, you know. So I think just be loose about it and recognize, oh, mommy said that? Ooh, sorry. I'm learning.
I love what you said about saying like, you know, if what you're doing is coming out of this place of love, even if it's not the right thing for that kid, because like you said before, what works great for one kid might not, you know, be the right approach for somebody else. But as long as you're doing it out of the place of love, that it counts for something. And I so agree, because to your point, Onya, you were saying that, you know, it's one thing being raised by African parents in Africa where everyone else is doing the same thing. I have Nigerian parents, I'm looking around, I'm with these Nigerian kids, you know. Whereas when you're in another place and you're like, I'm being disciplined in a certain type of way that none of my friends are, or I see the way my friends are relating to their parents as like almost like peers, just as people, they talk back, whatever. Mine are an authority figure. I like, you know, and I'm seeing that in a really like different way. But even then it's not like they came out with no scars and I came out with a ton of scars. Like everybody, you know, comes out with whatever baggage and everything. And so I think for me, the difference when I look at different things that, you know, my parents did that I didn't like or whatever, and the things, some of them I'm so grateful for, some of them I look back and I'm like, no, I don't love it, but it makes a lot of sense, or I see what, you know, where their head was at. And I think that's the difference for me actually, is when I see like, oh, I see that was coming out of a place of love and it was the wrong call, but that's fine. It was a place of love. There are other things that I actually see that I'm like, that was coming out of a place of insecurity, or that was coming out of a place of a lack of reflection, where you had a lot of stuff that you didn't deal with and you put that on me. And that's what makes me feel more resentful. It's like you gave something to me or put something to me on me that wasn't mine to hold, versus you were just doing and even that you're doing the best you can. But I do feel like that's a difference where I really do appreciate that distinction, because even sometimes when I think about certain scenarios of like, if I was a parent or whatever, I think about where my insecurities come up and where my gaps come up, and how I could totally see myself doing things or making decisions that aren't actually about the best interest in the child, but are about making me not look like a bad parent.
Yes.
You know, and I'm like, that doesn't have to do with them. That has nothing to do with them.
That's
it's not
all
decision,
you.
That's all me, and I'm putting that on them. So I'm like, I really actually do appreciate that distinction, because maybe it's not going to be the right call and it wasn't the best thing for the kid at the time or whatever, but as an adult, you can look back and you could be like, oh, yeah, I see what you did there, and I see that you were trying, and it was weird, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like where it starts to hurt a little bit more is when we don't take care of ourselves, and when we don't do that introspection, and we don't figure out, okay, like, what do I need to work through, and what do I just need to deal with myself and not put it on them.
Put it on the child. And that takes flexibility and not being like fixated on ideas or stuck in our ways. I think even in this world, the way the world is changing so rapidly, every parent, we just have to be flexible. I never imagined that. Well, maybe you should.
Right.
Maybe we should imagine those things that we thought, not in my, never in my culture or my life. Really, the world is changing so rapidly. Social media and the internet is making us more of a global village where even this thing about culture, the lines are blurring. Yes, I would say my kids are being raised by Nigerian parents, but I wouldn't say they're Nigerian. And they certainly haven't really grown up in a Nigerian. They had 6 months in Nigeria. My little one doesn't even remember. She's like, who? Right. She was 3. Hello. She doesn't remember anything about it. But yeah, there is that need for the flexibility as well. Oh, we would never have therapy. Really?
Right.
Maybe we should. Maybe we should just relax, loosen up and say, let's try it. And if we leave laughing, we know we tried it, but there's so many things I'm learning that my son at a time had a joke. He would say, I'm the experimental child. My parents just perform experiments on me. And I was like, because we didn't know what we were doing. We still don't. We could laugh about it. But, I take that in faith that I'm like, God, please have mercy. I'm trying my best, but... Before I was a parent, I had these dreams, ideals. Oh, my child would do this. My child would be like this. My child would never be like this. And then I got there and I'm like, those things don't hold.
It's not for me to control.
No.
Like, it's, so true. And I think about that too sometimes. I'll think about it. I'll go into my little fantasy world of what that would look like. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with this other person. And has everything to do with me and what I'm trying to live out and what I'm trying to heal. And I'm just like, how is that fair? Like, this has nothing to do with them. It's crazy.
And in parenting for you, has there ever been a time where something has happened with your child and you're like, okay, because right now, maybe it might be different for you because right now everybody has an advice on social media. Everybody's giving parenting advice or marriage advice and all those kind of things. Has there ever been a time when you wanted to do something for your child or your husband wanted to do something differently? How do you navigate that situation in order to do what's actually best for the child?
Yeah, and I have a very fresh example. So in our family, and every family is unique, in our family there is a designated leader. And we have agreed that would be my husband. Why? We're both powerful people in different ways. And so for me, I'm quite comfortable with relinquishing my power, but that's me. That's my personality. That's my choice in life. That's my decision. So we have an unspoken agreement that when really, really big decisions need to be made, even if I think differently, I'm happy to take the risk of following his hunch. Hence why I live in Calgary today in 2023. Because it wasn't my idea. It was one of those, for real? They said it's cold there. Yeah, I know. They said there's snow, as in a lot. Yeah, I know. And we're going, hey, like those moments. But it was that decision of, I'm going to trust you. And if we miss it, we're going to miss it together. It's a decision. Same goes with our kids. When really, really big decisions need to be made, I'm like, what do you want to have to see? Okay, well, I thought differently. And it doesn't always mean we do what he wants. Like often he'll say, well, what do you want? Like, you're the mom, we'll do it your way. And I'm like, no, maybe your way. And then he's like, no, what about your way? And I'm like, I don't know. So my daughter plays tennis, and it wasn't my idea for her to be in competitive tennis. When she wanted to play the game, I'm like, oh, cute. There's a tennis racket. They do tennis lessons at the club on Saturdays. We'll go. And then she's like, okay. So she starts that. Next thing she's like, can I have more lessons? And me, I'm looking at the calculator and the bank account, and I'm like, how
Like,
much?
what do you mean
Huh?
less
How
than
much per hour? Are you kidding me? And then next thing she's like, I want to compete. I want to compete.
That's cool.
And so my husband goes, yeah, I got her a coach. And I'm like, whoa.
Slow
Excuse
down
me.
here. Back up.
A coach? How old is she? She's 7. Which coach? Coach for what? And, I really struggled with the
Oh,
idea.
she's
I was like, I
Serena
just wanted to
Williams.
have fun. I don't like all this seriousness. When sports become serious, I don't like it. She's still playing tennis today. She's 13. It was never my idea. I'm the tennis parent who is clueless. In fact, I tell them I'm not really the tennis parent. You should probably call my husband. This is his number. But all I do is I drive her there. But you know what? I realize it's out of my league. It's not my thing. But this is not my life. This is a different person who says, I like this sport and I'm willing to compete. And when she went for her first tournament, oh my goodness, she lost every match. She didn't win a single one. She won one game. And in tennis, you play 6 games to make a set. She lost every set. She won one game. One set was 6-1. Everything else was 6-love. And my heart was breaking. My protective instinct was, we're never doing this again. Ever.
My job.
And when she finished, I said, honey, you never have to do this again. Let's just go home. I'll buy you ice cream. And she goes, I want to come back.
There you go.
And we went from tournament to tournament and we're still in it. But it was my husband's idea. And I decided I would go with them and just support them because at the end of the day, it's not my life. I'm also carrying my own baggage. I had to ask myself, why do I hate competing? Why do I hate competitive sports? It's because my baggage is losing makes me feel smaller. So I would rather shield myself so I will not compete. I will be like, let's play for fun. Once you start counting scores, I'm like, I'm out.
You're competitive.
Please.
Yeah.
But tennis is all about that.
Yeah.
When you're hitting next thing, somebody's like, let's count. And I'm like, I don't want to count, but my child wants to count. So who am I to hold her back? So, and then I recognized later that she's like her dad. So they have that in common.
Yeah.
And he's her dad. I'm only like half her DNA comes from me. Like she's his child. So I default to they have a father. He's responsible. He loves them. Let him make the big calls. And even if he says, no, I'm giving you this power, you say what we should do for them. I take that as a gift. And I'm like, okay, well, this is the idea I had. And we do it that way. But we have this unspoken agreement where we have a designated leader. The very long answer to your question.
I love
I
that.
love the long
I love the
answer.
perspective of, I feel like that tennis example was so good because I love that perspective. First of all, that statement of like, this isn't my life. It seems so obvious, but I think a lot of parents don't feel that way. I think a lot of parents, try to live vicariously through their children and don't even realize that they're doing it. And I think that idea of like, makes so much sense to have a statement in your mind like, oh, I don't like competitive sports because I think sports should be fun. And so we don't do them competitively in this house. And that feels like a really reasonable opinion to have. And though it's so interesting and so great that you actually took the time to be like, oh, why don't I like this? Yeah, I don't like competition. Like that, it makes me feel some type of way. But like, yeah, why would I rob my kid of this experience if they're into it and if they can lose and feel excited to try again? Like, why do I need to hold to this ideal of like, sports shouldn't be serious or, it has to be fun or whatever that looks like or competition isn't fun. And so the fact that, to your point about flexibility, you have flexibility there and we're able to have that moment of like, oh, yeah, I don't like this, but you do, and this isn't my life. So
Exactly.
go for it. I just love that.
You do you. And in tennis, you will also find some parents who are living their competitiveness out through their kids. Like I stand on the sidelines being the uninterested tennis player. I'm just watching people and I'm like, oh, you're really taking this seriously. And they're like, can't believe you just lost that game. And it's like, okay,
Exactly.
like, calm down.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Like that would be me because I'm so competitive, and then I would just be like, we're winners, okay? And I'm like, the worst type of like parent ever. Like,
and then they start serving alcohol. at one of the clubs.
Of course.
And then you get the parents who just, you can tell, how much have you drunk?
I'm
This
here
is
to
a
party.
kids competition. Hello, guys. Like,
Really? They're
it's
drinking on
intense.
behalf of the kids.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
intense. It's intense.
Honestly, hilarious.
Wow,
Sounds like a blast. Like also me. That's so
Oh, wow.
funny.
Okay, so my other question now would be about, like, you parented your children partly in the UK and in Nigeria and in Canada. I'll be interested to know the difference in all of them and how that has shaped your parenting journey. Like, what did you feel like? How did you feel like the UK experience was for you? How did you? I know we already touched a little on the Nigerian experience. Really, is that really any? Just be a parent in Nigeria, but
Yeah.
then, like, what? How does it differ, and how have you been able to merge all that experience to become the parent that you are?
Oh goodness, it's so complex. So each place has its different opportunities that allows us to branch out as parents. And then each place has its own culture that affects the child and how easy it is to parent the child. And then we've changed. Like, I'm not the same person. I don't even think I'm parenting my daughter the way I was for my son.
Right.
Yes, the two kids are different, but also I'm different.
You're different.
You know, I heard somebody say, if you're siblings, you have to recognize that you don't have the same parents. And I thought, how stupid is that? But then
Interesting.
I realized your parents were not the same people they were when they parented you compared to who they were when they parented your sibling. Even if they were the same personality-wise, they were not the same age-wise. They were not the same physiology-wise. We're constantly changing. So those things have been there in our journey, from being parents in England to our short little thing in Nigeria, to we've spent more years, have we? Well, no, we spent more years in England. But now it's 50-50. My son has spent 50% of his life in England and in Canada as well, and my daughter has spent more of her life here. We've had to adjust to the culture, recognizing that even though we're Nigerians and we have Nigerian culture, this is not Nigeria. There are good things about Nigerian culture. So one thing I would say to my kids is, you know why I'm doing this? Because I think it's a valuable part of my culture as a Nigerian. It's a valuable part of my heritage as a Nigerian.
You mentioned those parts because I'd like to. I feel like people could benefit from it.
Respect is a big one. You know, just knowing that you have your own ideas, but you're gonna respect your parents. Go with their stupidity if you think they're stupid. That's how we were taught. You know, I remember as an adult, my dad said to me, I recommend you do this. I didn't do it. And then he came back and he said, you did the exact opposite. I said, yeah, because it was a recommendation, Dad. And he said, never in my life. You know, and, well, he didn't say it in that pitch. He didn't say it in that pitch, but he was honestly offended. And my dad was a very laid back, chill Nigerian guy. And even he was like, when your parents says they recommend this, they're trying to tell you they would like you to do it this way. And, you know, it was disrespectful of you to not. And I'm like, hello, I'm 20 what now? But, you know, I had to keep quiet at that point and say, I'm very sorry, Daddy. Daddy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I see what you meant now. I recognize what you were thinking. Because I'd been raised to have that deference, that respectful, you are the parents. I may be an adult, but I still respect your position. I may not really respect your views, but I respect your position as my parents. That is a part of our culture that I think is valuable. That my husband does not speak anyhow to his mom and dad. He just won't, because that's how we've been trained. And even if we disagree, we're going to say, okay, mommy, daddy, thank you. You know, you still show that respect. Not, you know, you can, whatever, I don't care. So that is one part of Nigerian culture that I value, that I'm trying to teach my kids. And I sometimes say, the reason why I'm saying this is because that's how I was raised. And I do see value in it. This is why I'm the way I am. It's up to you. I get it. You can make your own decisions. So that's just one example. And there are many others, you know. But, and then again, it changes family to family. But that's a big one for me is respect, respect your elders. My kids don't just slap first name on people. There are lots of people who call me by first name, and I don't care. I've lived out of Nigeria long enough to not care if a 6-year-old is calling me Tolu. I'm not going to, it's Mrs. Tolu to you.
I can't call you Tolu. You say, please stop.
And I'm like, call me Tolu. Like, there are 6-year-olds who call me Tolu. I don't care.
Yeah.
But that's not how I raise my kids. Funny enough. I'm like, do they want you to call them Fred? Did you ask them what should I call you? Did you, because you could ask them what would you like me to? So you default to Mr. Fred or Dr. Fred or Uncle Fred or whatever until they say call me Fred. And I don't even know that is Nigeria is one of the cultures that does that, but I also encountered that in the US. Where living in England, it was first name for everybody. Hey, Tina is 70, by the way. Oh, blah, blah. And then I got to America and I just called a lady by her name and she said, oh, it's Dr. So-and-so. And I thought, oh, hang on. This is similar to
different world.
I had forgotten where I grew up.
Yeah.
So I started recognizing, and North America, Canada is interesting. Another thing I was going to say is, and I have to mention this, Canada has been an amazing place for migrating to for us because there's so many cultures going on here. It wasn't like that in England. In England, it was very much you're British or you're foreign. And you didn't really, well, this is my personal experience. Everybody's different, but I sometimes felt I wasn't permitted to celebrate my culture. It was almost like your culture is behind. There was that ethnocentricity was higher in the UK for me. It's high in Nigeria too, by the way, just saying. But I found it was less in Canada. Everybody in Canada that I met was coming from somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah, my niece, I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, she did some schooling in Canada and she made the observation. She said, everybody in my high school class has come from somewhere. So she didn't feel, just a poor Nigerian coming from Nigeria here. She held her head up and said, your grandparents are from Russia, right? Your grandparents came from where again? Scotland? Mine are from Nigeria. Well, it's a level playing field here. And we felt that more in Canada than we ever did in the UK, was that sense of everybody has a place here. So that definitely, my son said something to me when he did his first week of school in Canada, because I was really worried. I was like, hey, I hope I haven't destroyed this child, So I was like, how was it, how was school? He said, Mommy, there were 5 other brown people in my class. He's never been in a class where, in his entire school, there were 2 brown kids until one girl joined and she was only there for a year, and then my daughter was born, and then there was one little boy in nursery, so they ended up being 5 in the whole school. But for a long time, it was just him and another boy. And he'd never experienced it where he was not feeling like an ethnic minority as much. That there were people like him, that they also had foreign names, because, it's Tui Lily? Oh dear, this is not English.
Really?
Yes, and people wouldn't even make an effort, because you're either British or you're foreign. And somebody said to me once, I don't speak foreign. And I thought, okay.
Wow.
And your English is, even your, okay, never mind. So each country, but Canada has been amazing in that we have met people from all sorts of cultures, people who recognize that even though they're Canadian, maybe they're 3rd generation and they still value their heritage. We can still talk about, my grandfather was Ukrainian, my grandmother was, Cuban, whatever. There is that sense of commonality here that has been helpful for us. So my daughter doesn't see, she's just like, they're Canadian. My son even sees it more, but she's been here 10 years of her 13-year life. For her, she's just, yeah, okay. I'm foreign, not foreign. I'm from around here. And so it's a different experience, even parenting that kind of child who is more Canadian than I am. Sorry, what was your question again?
I think you pretty much answered the question.
That, like, difference in parenting, like, how those influences kind of affect. And so I think that's super interesting, that experience in the UK versus here.
So would you say that actually helped you to be a better parent, like moving to this part of the world?
It made it easier to be a parent. I don't think I would feel comfortable enough to call myself a better parent, because even as we speak, I'm still making my mistakes and I'm still learning, but easier to be a parent here. I feel like, my son had more community around him. He played more sports. There was just a lot more opportunity for things here for us compared. So those things made it easier.
That's awesome. But it's just interesting, like the different generations, and because for you, you grew up, it was pretty white in this part of the world, and his experience, Tiwa's experience in the UK, is literally Tomi's experience. I don't know, I shouldn't be speaking for you, but like that's pretty much her own experience. So she felt like she was the only black kid, and she was in a very white world. Oh, Tommy, I shouldn't be speaking for you.
No, that's okay. I feel like you're going somewhere with that. So
and she like to the point where some people, like if people came to visit her, they would go to like the gas station. They're like, we're looking for the black family here. And they're like, oh, up the hill, that kind of thing. So like it's just interesting. And for me, moving here, I really struggled with everything. I really struggled with my identity. I really struggled with who I am as a person. I really struggled with if my accent was enough, if my experience was. I still struggle with that. But I started getting more comfortable with my accent and everything after I started working. And my bosses were like, it's a normal thing. This is Canada. Like they had to explain to me, this is Canada and people come from different walks of life. Yeah. And in fact, my boss is even married to Mexican. And he's like, I'm married to a Mexican. So like, it doesn't bother us as long as we can understand you and your accent is not like you speak good English, right? But it took me having those insecurities and struggling a lot before I was able to like embrace that. Okay, yeah, I'm not from this part of the world, but I am still cool in this part of the world.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just different for everyone. And even my own child, like he hasn't voiced it, but you just look and you see the way he's treated or you see the way something happens and you're like, I don't know if it's because of the way he is. I don't want to put an idea in his head. But what if this is the reason why this happened this way? So how are you able to handle situations like that where you're like, okay, I don't like the way my son was treated. And the person that treated him that way didn't treat him right. But the way you treated the other child who is white is different from the way you treated my son. And they did almost the same thing. So like, where do you now start to say, okay, maybe this person wasn't trying to be biased. Maybe there's something actually wrong. Like, how do you apply that in a way that is suitable for the child and for you as a parent, where you don't start to overthink things?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I think it's important to first of all look in and consider myself. My experience when I migrated was very convoluted, quite mixed up, but I had times when I was made to feel foreign and therefore made to feel less. And in my younger days, my response to that was anger and sometimes aggression and a misuse of my own power where, I confess, not always proud of it, but there was a moment where I witnessed a crime and I refused to testify because that was my power. And I was like, I'm not even coming forward to tell you guys I have evidence because I want you to struggle and suffer, and that was my response. It was wrong because when later on I looked at my life and I was like, what was wrong with you? But I was angry. I was in a place of, you don't need information from me. I'm less than. So go. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you I saw what happened. I'm keeping it to myself. And that was wrong. And so that response, why did I share that? Because I think everybody, if we're being honest, would have had moments where we were made to feel less than. And for those of us who are immigrants, I often think our race, our ethnicity, our accent, our education, our experience is brought to the fore because we're different, because we're foreign, So how do we then consider it for our child? Because I've had times when I've had to say, somebody did this to my child, my response is anger. Why am I angry? I'm angry because I feel you're not going to do that to my child like you did to me, and I'm going to fight for my child, And then I have to calm down and say, okay, that's not a great response. How do I communicate to them that I don't think that was the best way to do that, even though I see where you're coming from? So I have had times when I've had to speak up for my child and say, I kind of disagree with where you're coming with that, because I think what you've maybe unconsciously done is you have made it sound like my child is less than. And I wonder why. And reason why I do that is I can be slightly confrontational because I want people to have a chance to consider what they're doing. I'm not okay with just accepting necessarily. I think it's important for me to also say, I do have a voice. I'm not going to abuse it, but I'm going to use it and say, I want you to rethink that. This is how it came across to me. I feel like you assumed the response of my child was based on this. What if you're wrong? Just what if? And it gives them a chance to rethink. Now, there are some people who are innately racist and don't even realize it. Innately racist because they just believe that the difference in races means a difference in other things, a difference in intelligence, a difference in, ability to succeed or whatever. And they don't even recognize it. And they bring it into scenarios. They bring it into conversations. I had somebody talking to me and he said, where are you originally from? And I said, Nigeria. This was in England, by the way. And he said, Nigeria. We colonized you, didn't we?
Wow. And I'm like, this flex.
Now, in fairness to
can
him,
you imagine?
In fairness to him, this was in 2005. So it's been a while. I mean the world has come a long way in terms of language. But when he said that, I thought to myself,
as a point of pride or something.
You don't know me.
Exactly.
We're having a first conversation, his introduction, and the first thing you say to me is, we colonized you, and I said, okay.
What's that supposed to even, what are you trying to say?
So, and I purposely made it awkward.
Yeah.
I was
You're sit in this. What you said was ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he awkwardly changed the subject. And I'm like, so when you see Nigerians, the first thing that comes to your mind is, we colonized you. In short, you are beneath us.
Yeah.
We brought civilization to your savage world, didn't we? And more recently, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, someone in Canada was having a conversation and said, Nigeria, you guys are known for 419, aren't you? And I said, we and all the people from all over the world who are in it with us, and even some who have educated us in the art of 419, including from your country. And he's like,
he never experienced
it. He's like, sorry, I didn't mean it to come out that way. And I said, and I probably attacked you a little bit, but I need you to recognize that the whole 419 thing is not a Nigerian problem. Corruption is also coming from your country. Some people in your country are funding the 419 in my country. So what are you talking about? I guess he didn't expect somebody to be confrontational, but I think there are times when we should be for the health of the other person and say, what have you just said? We think that. I know you're better than this. I know you're better. So these are the things I do personally, but also I recognize the other person can be genuinely ignorant sometimes, and I have to give them grace. I have to, if I was to talk to that guy who said the colonization thing again today, I'd probably laugh and say, you could get into a lot of trouble for saying that thing. Maybe let's not say that next time.
So
and, just offer grace as well, because they're genuinely ignorant.
But I think you are right, though, in the fact that a reaction does play a really important role. I think too, just for somebody to understand too, how absurd or silly or just really inappropriate what they said was, that sometimes if you do go in very soft and very I'm going to help you understand that, they actually aren't going to, not that it's your job or anyone else's job to educate them, but they don't get an idea of the gravity of the absurdity. And so sometimes I do think it makes sense, even if you've heard it a million times, even if you were that doesn't surprise me that you would say that. Sometimes I do think it does make a lot of sense to give that, like you said, that awkwardness or the excuse me? I literally must not have heard you right, because that was crazy. And have them be oh, yeah, I mean, sit in that thing, because you're that was weird. We do this is a really good segue, because we ask these same two questions to everyone at the end of our episode, and you already started talking about this, ladies, sort of assumptions or misconceptions. So one of the questions that we like to ask everybody is, what is a common myth or misconception that you come across a lot, and whether that's here or in the UK?
So many, but to keep it short, I think I would just give one answer to both, and it's the promised land syndrome is how I see it. Of this is the promised land.
Yeah.
When I get there, my dreams will come true. My
That's really
kids will
good.
be in line.
Yeah.
My kids will have the best. I often have people say, I'm moving because I want my kids to have the best. And then what the flip side of that promised land syndrome is, where you're coming from is not good enough, or where you're coming from is accursed, where you cannot succeed there, you cannot stay there. So and I think it's a myth and it's a misconception, because I think it's important to recognize, this is my belief as a person of faith, the earth belongs to God. And the Bible actually says he has put people in different parts of the earth. But when you look at even the Bible story, people migrated. It's like, come with me to a land I will show you. Why? Because he owns it. He owns it all. He owns the land that is seen as the not promised land. He owns the land that is seen as the promised land. And it's a joint effort. So yeah, I think it's wrong to think when you migrate there, your dreams will come true, your problems will suddenly disappear. And then you get there and you find, no, there's this culture shock that's happening. There's this economic culture shock that's happening. And it becomes not the promised land. And then you feel disillusioned. Like, where is the promised land? But yeah, so that is what I would say is wherever you are. At that point in your life, that is your promised land. Make the most of it. And if God says you're going to move somewhere else, there needs to be a purpose. The purpose isn't that is the land.
Right.
It is, I'm going there to serve a purpose, to fulfill a role, the role I've been created for.
I love that.
That's
really
powerful. I've never actually looked at it that way. So it's just like, this is not, like, you don't have the right to say, I don't belong here. Because I do belong here.
You belong here.
As long as I'm a child of God and this is my father's land.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I love that.
And then one other question we also ask is, what is one thing you wish you knew before actually buying that one-way ticket, whether to the UK or to Nigeria, back home, or here? Or maybe just give us the three of them.
My ticket to the UK was a return ticket, and then my husband,
Okay.
my husband did it because I was going to use it. I was actually going to go back home and say, come and find me in Nigeria. Long story. One thing I wish I knew before I bought my ticket. Oh, goodness. I wish I was better guided in terms of my own self worth. My own self-worth. It's almost like, if I could go back and do it again, what would I do differently? And it would have been, there's so many things. Only the answer to your question is super long, because there's so many things I would have done differently. And some of those things I now know. Like, I wish I'd known before I moved to England to give myself and others more grace. I wish I'd known before I came to Canada to do my research.
Fair enough. While you were coming to Ontario,
I was like, oh, it's all Canada.
That's fair.
But I have fallen in love with Calgary. So even when we were in a position to move to Ontario, we're like, no, we like it here. We're going to stay here. But just be a bit more aware culturally of where I was going to. It took me a little while to figure out, where are we in the world?
So
But yeah, it's the little things, It's maybe wish I'd taken more time to spend quality time with my own family, instead of just, I'm getting married, I'm leaving, I'm going, I'm starting a new life. And I felt I missed out on some things with my own family, many possible things, but that's in the past. And that's why it's a difficult question to answer, because you're like, flush that.
we're
moving on.
Yeah. I love that.
That's wonderful. But I don't know, sorry to pull you back.
Yes, pull me back.
Because one thing is, when you talk about, like, my uncles, they keep asking me, you've not gone to see your uncle since. You've only seen him once because my uncle lives in Ottawa. And I'm like, it's not that easy to see people like that. Like, it's not like it's very close. But people might not understand. You keep saying when you came to Calgary, you were confused, where am I? But Ontario was. So, like, what was the significant difference that you found in both provinces?
And it's not even the difference between the provinces, it's how vast the land is and how enormous the terrain is. So actually I thought of one thing I wish I had done in Europe. I wish I had traveled Europe more. Yeah, because I lived there and I was
I'd love to do.
The Olympic Village, I went there rolling my eyes. Let's just go there. 2012. I wish I had traveled Europe more because it was so accessible. It's accessibility for me in Canada that's different. And like I said, even when you find the flight, like when I was going to do a simple document signing that required some immigration stuff, I went to do it in the US. It was easier to go to California than BC.
Wow.
And I couldn't compute how. But the flights to BC were timed differently. The hotels were priced differently. It was just easier to go and do it in California.
Crazy.
So that is what makes it awkward in Canada, is moving around is not as easy as I would have liked. And I wish I can't go back now, but that would have been something. But then I realized when I moved here, I realized, okay, it's different. It's not like England where, I'm in London now, I'm in Birmingham now. It's different.
That makes sense.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was such a good conversation. Oh my gosh, just so insightful and just really, really appreciate your perspectives.
Thank you. And
Thank
hopefully
you.
one day we can bring her back with Tua.
Yes.
Yes.
Let's do it.
And he can spill all the beans and
yeah,
tell you.
yeah.
Oh, she was awful. Like, she had no idea what she was doing. Awful.
We'll just
one
pretend
day.
like we're not in the room and like,
Okay. Have some hidden cameras.
how about it?
Airbuds in. But
Love
one
it.
day, by God's
Yes.
grace,
We'll chat
we
again.
would.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you,
All
guys.
right.
you.
That is all for this episode. Thank you for listening. Until next time.
Till next time. Bye. The Diary of a Niger Immigrant is proudly presented to you through Onyi's Lens. You can keep up with us on Instagram by following The Diary of a Niger Immigrant and through Onyi's Lens. Don't forget to rate, share, like, and drop a comment on topics you'd like us to discuss. And I'll see you on the next one.